I think we're about ready, aren't we?
I think we are.
Yes, sir. I'm going to grab a coffee here. I'll see you in a minute, sir.
All right. Be watching.
Good morning, Mr. Stinson.
Hi, good morning, ma'am. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
Good. Welcome, welcome, Mr. Smoot.
Good morning, Madam Secretary.
See, Mr. Miller, this is kind of like having the Wizard of Oz. You just kind of pop up. I know. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm Shannon Valentine. We're very pleased to have you here. We're just going to finish up items from the workshop from yesterday. Is Kathy McGee here? I'm going to have Kathy just give a quick rundown on the Innovation and Technology Committee from yesterday. Good morning. And in fairness, because I did ask you, I go, oh, is Kathy in the room yesterday? In fairness, she was attending a meeting for me. So I go, oh, yeah, now I know where she is. Oh, good, good.
Few highlights from our Innovation and Technology Subcommittee meeting yesterday morning, and I would ask any of the subcommittee members to jump in if I leave something out. We took some time yesterday to get a couple updates on some of our current projects funded in the ITTF program. The first of those is the I-81 Innovative Strategies project. And that really is intended to build upon the operational improvements that have been made as a part of the I-81 corridor program, all of that great technology that's been deployed through the corridor. This project is looking at how we leverage that technology to deliver strategies that get at particular trouble spots along the corridor. So we formed a stakeholder group and we virtually walked the entire corridor talking about what challenges existed in particular locations. And then we took a step back and said, okay, given those problems, what solutions can we bring to bear on those problems? And so we have a list, more than we can pay for. And we're in the process of prioritizing those now. But just to give you a flavor of what some of them are, we're looking at some advanced curve speed warning systems beyond the flashing chevrons that have been pretty effective out there now. What's the next step to that? There's an educational component to that particular strategy, but we think it can be really effective. Again, on 81, where we have so many work zones and lanes that start and stop, that could be a really big game changer. And then just queue warning. Everyone wants to know where those queues are building, and it's a huge safety benefit if we can get people to begin to slow down in advance of the end of queue as opposed to coming upon it suddenly and hitting the brakes really hard. So that's just a flavor of what we have on our list. We'll be prioritizing and figuring out what we can afford and then moving those projects forward. I will say we're working collaboratively with Dave Covington to make sure that those projects and strategies that can be worked into the overall TMP, the traffic management plan for the work on 81, that happens as those projects move forward. The other project we got an update on is the one I probably talked to you the most about, and that's the Regional Multimodal Mobility Program, RN3P, in Northern Virginia, which has now, I'm happy to tell you, has been expanded to include Fredericksburg, thanks to a federal grant that we received. So we were able to extend the reach of that technology on down into Fredericksburg. To bring us our data exchange platform. So we don't have to start from scratch. They already have a lot of our data, and we're just expanding from there. 3 of the remaining 4 program elements will be out for bid by this fall. That would be the decision support system, which sits on top of the data exchange platform, the parking information system, and my favorite, dynamic incentivization. The 5th program element is the Multimodal Analytic tool, which really gets into the transit piece. As we talked about yesterday, transit is sort of in flux right now, and because that analytic platform relies so heavily on trend data, we're going to give it a little time, see what those new trends look like before we dive so deeply into that one. We also spent just a few minutes talking about future topics for the subcommittee meetings. So we're going to have a presentation on advanced air mobility, the air taxis that we're seeing in the news now. We're looking forward to hearing more about that, as well as continuing our conversations around Hyperloop and what that might mean for the Commonwealth. So it was the first time we'd met in 18 months probably, and it was great to be back together and to get those conversations started. So as we go forward, we'll also continue to get updates on the ongoing projects as well as the new projects that will be kicking off soon.
So anybody from the committee? Oh, Mr.
Actually, I have a
Buckley.
question. So, Kathy, before the pandemic, we had started a project that I guess we ended up calling Speed Aware with Margie and her group, which would ultimately, in its full manifestation, give us the ability to look at real-time speed data on most of our routes within the Commonwealth of Virginia that had sufficient traffic volume to track cell phone signals. Kind of revolutionary data set. And I asked you yesterday, if, after spending additional time on this, if you thought that that project had any technological barriers that would keep us from achieving that. As we saw yesterday, the accidents in the Commonwealth are in large part driven by speed, and even more so during the recent pandemic. Can you give us just a quick report? I'm very excited about that, especially on a day where we're going to make recommendations on what we're going to do as a board to improve safety without really clear visibility into where speeding is occurring, what mechanisms we have at our disposal or within the Commonwealth to attempt to attenuate that speeding. I'm very excited about it, as you can tell. Can you give us an update on where that stands and what it will take to bring it to full fruition?
Sure. So as we got started with that effort, we came to be aware of a similar effort underway through DMV. They were working with Virginia Tech and the state police to do a very similar piece of work on the interstates. And so we decided we could leverage that work and we would focus on the non-interstates while they worked on the interstates. Both of those efforts are moving forward, and we're trying to make sure that when they're both complete, that they integrate nicely. And so the DMV work really is focused on law enforcement and identifying in real time where those speeding hotspots are for enforcement purposes. The work that we talked with you about was broader than that. That obviously was a component of it, but there was also an offline, are there other mitigation strategies that we could undertake to address speeding where we're seeing it's a continuous problem as opposed to it's Wednesday, so this is a problem. And so, we're trying to take both of those approaches and bring them together, but that work is moving forward.
But as I recall, the DMV approach was not using cell phone data.
Correct, right. It's using data, again, from our common data
platforms.
platforms.
Approach using cell phone data would be a brilliant tool.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Mr. Tonk, anything you want to add?
The only thing I would add is similar to the video that we saw at the beginning of yesterday's meeting. It's very apparent that Ms. McGee's group has been working very hard through the last pandemic period. So appreciate all the effort that has continued. Thank you.
It was a good meeting. Yeah, just sorry we haven't met in 18 months. And Cedric's on the committee too, so 3 of us.
Oh, Cedric.
One of the things that I felt most strongly about is the ongoing work of the committee, especially you and your leadership, and maximizing the use of the data that we actually have. One of the things that continues to come forward in these discussions is, data, collecting information. What happens with that? That really, how do we know what we're doing is effective? Kind of going with Mr. Kasowitz was talking about. And again, the presentation yesterday was just phenomenal. And us putting, really grabbing hold and analyzing that. And as the presentation indicated yesterday, using that to continue to inform the work that we're doing on an ongoing basis, not just a one shot.
That is absolutely one of the biggest parts of the ITTF program is collecting that evaluation data so that we know going forward what makes sense and what we should then deploy somewhere else.
Exactly.
I think, Scott, we're going to have an air taxi demo next month if you want to ride. We'll have an air taxi demo next month if you want to ride.
I'd like to be part of it.
Going to bid on it like the space flight.
Yeah, and I have some strong thoughts on both.
Oh, we're gonna close that gap.
You're right, exactly.
All the work is it's kind of just re-engaging everyone. Very, very important. I'll also say that, you know, Kathy, when she looks at data and applications, she's doing it across the entire secretariat as well. So bringing in aviation is really important because I think aviation has a lot of implications for surface transportation. Kathy also, with Ronique Day, led the phase 1 EV readiness study. I think there was a piece, though, I think as you're talking about SS, safety service patrols, one of the recommendations that came from that phase 1 was looking at a pilot of using the safety service patrols or providing them with portable chargers for electric vehicles.
Right.
So that if someone does get stuck and we don't have all the infrastructure in place, which we do not today, we are moving on that. You know, that could be a way of servicing and helping people who do lose power. And so anyway, I just mentioned that to you as, you know, some of our pilot ideas.
Right. The technology isn't quite there yet. It would take longer to charge the vehicle on the roadside than to tow it to a charging location because we care about safety on the roadside. We're not quite there, but we're keeping track of what's going on with the technology so that when that becomes effective. And I want to point out DRPT has been a great partner across all of these projects. Jen DeBrule is amazing and such a great partner. So.
Yes. And you're going to be trying to put together a strategy for moving into a phase 2 with EVs. And I've asked Marty Williams to be a liaison with you on that project to make sure we're getting board input as we're developing that. So, I wanted just to bring that to your attention too. Okay, anything else? Yes.
Question. Since many of us on the board have interest in rail and technology, I wonder if it might be possible to schedule those meetings on alternate days. So even if we're not part of the subcommittee, we could at least be observers. Just a thought.
Is Carol listening? I'm looking at Carol Mathis. I think that's a maybe. We'll see. And the environmental subcommittee is going to meet immediately following the CTB. Yes. So anyway, to close out Kathy, thank you. Close out my section, I did want to share with the board that last Tuesday, a few of us went to the National Reconnaissance Office launch out at Wallops Island, and it was really a beautiful launch. We were all up at 4. I was joined by the commissioner, Rob Carey, Julie Whitlock from the AG's office, John Lawson. So the 5 of us were over there. We represented Richmond very, very well. And so, you know, at 6 o'clock in the morning, approximately, there were welcomes. The launch was at 7. So we had the United States Space Force, NASA Goddard, NASA Langley, Virginia Space, NRO, National Intelligence there for this meeting. And as I've worked with our partners, and in particular NASA Goddard, NASA Langley, and Virginia Space, and the NASA Wallops Flight Facility, you know, we will be in meetings, and I have, at times, as we were having discussions, shared with the folks at these entities that perhaps I had missed my calling. Maybe I should have been a rocket scientist. Which I'm sure, Yeah, I brought it up a few times as we were kind of going through some analysis, and we're talking about orbital ranges, and I think, gosh, maybe I could have done that. And so they've always assured me that it's not too late. So as we're kind of looking at career, and so anyway, at 6 o'clock in the morning, Dennis Andrusik, who's Center Director for NASA Goddard, and Clayton Turner, who's the Director for NASA Langley, and Dale Nash, CEO at Virginia Space, presented me with a doctorate in rocket science. I am now a doctor of rocket science. I told them that I could not wait to share this with my husband. Who can I just tell you, Cedric, the entire crowd sounded just like you. And I'm not sure why, but I told my husband, he did confirm anyone can get a doctorate in cardiology. However, rocket science, I think, is really special. So, and there's a flag here. They pointed out, because I'm sure the crowd was in doubt. I had not been to space. But the flag has flown on the International Space Station. So anyway, a doctor of rocket science. And so my colleagues at VDOT, when I got to work, taped because of high technology, doctor. And so anyway, just, when people were going, oh, what are you going to do with your life? Well, there you go. So anyway. Yes. Can I tell you, in my career, I don't know if I've ever laughed so hard. It was the funniest, right, Julie? Completely. Was I surprised? I think I bent over. I was just, it was so funny. And there's moments in life where you completely, like somebody just really got you. I was like, oh my goodness. But of course it took NASA Goddard and NASA Langley to pull that off. However, anyway, just didn't want to miss the opportunity to share this moment. I said, you know what? I think people are going to hear about this again. Because I would not want you all to, I like to share these moments in my life with you. This is not my computer.
Rocket science.
Okay, I was. Okay, will you tell them this was not my fault? There you go. Here, say that, Richard.
It's not Secretary Valentine's fault.
There you go. Just making the point, Mr. Williams. Anyway,
And that part of the video to
So on that note, I'm going to adjourn the workshop. Action meeting.
You're still putting a bid to go with Bezos to space, it's not too late.
No, yes, what is it, $28 million? It was good. Was it?
That whole presentation.
Yes, well, it was a surprise to me.
Finish it off like
Would you believe me if I told you I'd planned that?
Yeah.
Anyway, there you go. There are moments in life. Okay, so let's see. The first thing, do we have any public comment? Trenton Clark. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you in person and not through Zoom.
Yes, it's really nice to see you in person.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to have you last week join us virtually for our annual meeting. It's good to have Rob and Bart with us as well. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Trenton Clark, and I'm the president of the Virginia Asphalt Association. Members across the Commonwealth with more than 10,000 members. We contribute about $1 billion a year to the economy. And so we're very active across the Commonwealth and working with VDOT because our mission is to promote, but also to enhance quality. And that's part of the reason I'm here today is the quality side. Rob, where'd you go? There's Rob. I was like, you know, you always walk forward and you wonder who's behind you and there's nobody there. An alliance is called the 2020 Perpetual Payment Award. You might say, what the heck is a Perpetual Payment Award? It's an award that's been around for about 20 years, and it celebrates long-lasting payments. Now, this is the second award Virginia won. Virginia won this award actually back in 2005 for a section of I-81, actually north of Winchester in Frederick County. So it's the second time. Why have we only won it twice? Frankly, because we've only put in 2 applications. So we're 2 for 2. So if nothing else, we're perfect. This section came about from the leadership of Ken King in Salem District. Ken allowed some of his staff, some of the staff here at Central Office, and my Vice President, David Lee, to collect the information on I-81. And just to give you some idea of how rigorous this is, the pavement had to be in service for 35 or more years. This section of 81 in Salem District's been in service for close to 60. Pavement also has to say no structural improvements. So since the pavement was constructed in 1964, to only last 20 years, it's had overlays, and that's it. So we haven't had to go in and do major rehab. The section at 1 is adjacent to the design build job that Archer Western just was awarded. So this is a great section. It's handled in pavement geek terms, 100 million easels, which translates to a very long time. So why do I bring this to your attention? It's a great award. Not every state has won it. Some states have been more aggressive in putting in nominations, and frankly, we hope to work with the districts like we did with Salem to get Virginia recognized for the amount of work and the quality of work that's going on. So this is a great award, and it really points out not only longevity, but a lot of the conversation, you know, is turned to sustainability. Build it and have it last a long time. Be good stewards of the resources. The work that's done on this section really points that out, because over time, as we have had to resurface it over a 13-year period, you know, we've used newer technologies. Asphalt plants burn a lot cleaner because, as you can imagine, DEQ is very interested in their air permits and the emissions. We use a lot of recycled material, which cuts down on the amount of recycled or virgin binder we have to use, new rock. We've got sections now in the state that use tires. We're doing research on plastic. So there's a lot of effort going on underway to continue to use this. But the other thing for the taxpayer is very economical. When you consider the section's been in place for close to 60 years with almost nothing done to it, cost-wise, life cycle-wise, is extremely effective. Keeps us out of the road, keeps your people out of the road, keeps our contractors out of the road, that makes it safe, and it helps Virginia achieve its mission. So with that, I'd like to present this to you, Rob, who I imagine you knew was one time the district administrator for Salem District. I have no idea if he had anything to do with that section, because you're not that old either. Both of these sections are older than us. So Rob, congratulations. And this fall, we'll have another meeting where we actually get an obelisk from the Asphalt Pavement Alliance that we'll be able to present to the commissioner and to the rest of the staff on this great achievement. And hopefully we get some paperwork together and we win one of these next year. So Rob, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Trenton. I do want to, 2 things. I want to thank Elaine Thurman and Ibrahim Abawad, who were a materials engineer in Salem and a contractor employee that put this award together to submit it, so they get credit for that, certainly. And really, I think it's a tribute, as Trenton said, to really years and years of attention to detail and doing the right things. And I tell our employees all the time, we're at our very best when we're invisible. And what I mean by that is just like the power came on at your house today, you didn't have to write the power company to thank somebody for their efforts. This is the kind of work that we're got in, got out, and stayed out, and got out of the way. And that's, you know, that's us doing our job behind the scenes and doing the right things so that we're not interfering with traffic more than we have to. And I think this is a great example of being at our best when we're invisible, being out of the way, out of sight, but doing great work behind the scenes. So thank you to Trenton, thanks to the contractor partners out there, and particularly thanks to the staff in our materials division here in the central office and the Salem district for really, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, and this is absolute great work. So thank you.
And Trenton, thank you for coming. That was really great. We appreciate that. Gary LaRoe?
Dr. Valentine? It's, and the rest of the CTB, it's a...
Yes, well.
It's a pleasure to be able to address you in that form as one of the first ones to do that. So thank you very much. My name is Gary LaRue. I'm the county administrator in Botetourt County, and I'm here today with Ken McFadden, who is our director of economic development. And I have two items that I would like to bring before you. One is an obvious that you already know, but I just want to reiterate that. And his name has already been mentioned here before, but Dr. Ray Smoot serves us exceptionally well, and I know he's on the line, so thank you, Dr. Smoot, for serving us in the Salem district and with Botetourt County on the CTB, and does a great job with that. The other folks that do a wonderful job there is Ken King, has already been mentioned, and Ray Varney and Ashley Smith and everyone else that's in their group of VDOT personnel is just fabulous, and it's just an enjoyable time working with them and everything that they do. So I wanted to bring that to you. The second thing that is more self-serving, I would suspect, is item 10 on your agenda, and that was about economic access entry in Botetourt County that's on there on the agenda, and I certainly do appreciate any consideration that you might end up giving for that. That road, if approved, would end up serving a Swedish company that we have been able to recruit to Botetourt County, and so a couple hundred new jobs and $36 million in capital investment, plus it would end up serving another additional lot that we have, and we've got some interest on it as well. So anything that you can do, certainly do appreciate it, and thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we will be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Is there anyone else here today who would like to address the board? And we do not have accommodations for people to call in. No, we do not. Correct. So, okay. But if people are listening and thought they could call in, they can submit comments. No? Yes, they can. Okay, good. So, and they're always welcome to call and let us know. So there you go, which is just standard practice. Before we move on to the minutes, I will just point out that Richard did have to come over and replace the jacket to the computer, which is not mine, but yes, because it was broken, but okay. With that, can I get a motion on the minutes?
I will. Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, do we need to do a roll?
We need to do a roll call.
Okay, please indicate your approval with the roll call. Mr. Merrill. Mr. Rucker.
Yes.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Stinson.
Aye.
Mr. Brown. Mr. Kasperlitz. Mr. Malvin. Mr. Tunk. Mr. Williams. Mr. Yates. Ms. Hines. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Dodson.
Yay.
Dr. Smoot.
Yay.
Roll's complete. The minutes are approved. Did we get Jerry's done? Yes. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Susan King. Good morning.
Dr. Valentine, members of the
Good
board.
morning.
I have one item for consideration today, and it's an allocation approval for the preferred alignment, alignment number 2, for the Bailey Bridge Connector in Chesterfield County and Richmond District. This is a county-administered project and provides for the connection between Brad McNair Parkway, or Route 5655, and Route 654, or Bailey Bridge Road. This new connection provides a critical link in Chesterfield County in their thoroughfare plan and will help alleviate some of the congestion at 288 and Hull Street Road interchange. Chesterfield County held a virtual location hearing in October of 2020. The County Board of Supervisors supported the locally preferred alternative, or alignment number 2, by resolution dated April 2021. The total estimated cost of the project is around $23 million, and I am recommending approval of the locally preferred alternative, or alignment number 2, for the location of the Bailey Bridge Connector.
Mr. Williams, would you like to make this motion?
I move that we adopt.
Second.
Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call. Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Mr. Dodson. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Hines. Mr. Yates. Mr. Williams. Mr. Tunk. Mr. Malbin. Mr. Kasperwitz.
Aye.
Mr. Stinson.
Aye.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Rucker. Mr. Merrill. The roll is complete. The resolution's approved. Thank you. Ms. Pryor. Good morning.
Good morning. I have 3 items for you this morning. Do you want to take them individually?
Yes, I do.
Okay. The first item is our normal monthly transfers, and I recommend your approval.
So moved.
Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call. Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
Mr. Rucker.
Aye.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Stinson.
Aye.
Mr. Kasperlitz. Mr. Malbin. Mr. Tunk. Mr. Williams. Mr. Yates. Ms. Hines. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Dodson. Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
The roll is complete. The motion's passed.
Thank you. The second item is a smart scale budget increase for the Route 311 and 419 intersection improvements in Roanoke County in the Salem District. I briefed the board on this budget increase last month, and I recommend your approval.
Mr. Smoot.
Move approval. And we are using district funds.
Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote with the roll call. Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Mr. Dodson. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Hines. Mr. Yates. Mr. Williams. Mr. Tunk. Mr. Malbin. Mr. Kasperwitz. Mr. Stinson. Mr. Miller. Mr. Rucker.
Aye.
Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
The roll is complete. The motion's passed.
Thank you. The third item I have is a smart scale project cancellation for the Route 29 and Route 6 R cut in Nelson County in the Lynchburg district. I also briefed the board on this last month, and I recommend your approval.
Mr. Dodson.
Yes, I move approval. This cancellation was as a result of the request for the Board of Supervisors in Nelson County. I will say there's another smart scale project that in Nelson County that we've recommended to the board. So I move the resolution.
Second.
Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call. Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
Mr. Rucker.
Aye.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Stinson. Mr. Kasperwitz. Mr. Malbin. Mr. Tunk. Mr. Williams. Mr. Yates. Ms. Hines. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Dodson. Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Roll's complete. The resolution's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Farmer. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Secretary and members of the board. Jamie Motley and I are here today to present the budgets for the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, for VDOT, and for DRPT. The resolution includes code requirements for the board to administer and allocate funds in the Transportation Trust Fund, as well as allocate other available funds. Both agencies recommend approval of the budgets for fiscal year 22.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Dr. Smoot,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Hines, Mr. Yates,
Aye.
Mr. Williams, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Malbin,
Aye.
Mr. Kasperlitz, Mr. Stinson, Mr. Miller, Mr. Rucker, Mr. Merrill. The roll is complete. The resolution's approved.
Thank you. Kim Pryor back? Well, actually, you're both back. There you go.
Present a resolution for adoption of the FY 2022 to 2027 six-year improvement program. We briefed the board on the details of the program for DRPT and VDOT yesterday, and we recommend your approval.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Mr. Merrill,
Aye.
Mr. Rucker,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Kasperlitz, Mr. Malbin,
Aye.
Mr. Tunk, Mr. Williams, Mr. Yates, Ms. Hines, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Dodson, Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
The roll's complete. The resolution's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the board, Rick Studley is going to be presenting 5 items to us. Unless there's an objection, I'm going to ask for a block vote. Would anybody like to call any one of these out? Okay, so Mr. Dudley will go through, we'll do a block vote on these.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Madam Secretary, members of the board. Today I have 5 items for your consideration, 4 of which were reviewed during May's workshop. The first item is request for approval of the fiscal year 22 urban street inventory and maintenance payments, as well as the distribution of other revenue associated with overweight permit fees, Virginia Port Authority payments, and movable structures to support the city of Chesapeake. I provided the board an overview of these payments during May's workshop. However, at the time, we had not finalized our payment structure for the urban streets and the other revenue distribution. Subject to the board's approval, we have determined that arterial streets in the urban system should receive a fiscal year 22 payments of $22,524.22 for each moving lane mile. This is an increase from $22,161.46 per lane mile provided during this past fiscal year. Local and collector streets will receive payments of $13,224.70 for each moving lane mile. This has also increased from $12,011.71 per lane mile during the past year. Also, again, subject to your approval, each locality will receive $13.53 per lane mile in overweight permit fee revenue. In addition, the localities of Portsmouth, Newport News, Norfolk, and Warren County will receive a combined $1 million in annual payments associated with compensation for VPA-owned tax-exempt real estate in those localities. And finally, the city of Chesapeake will receive an additional $1 million to support their operation and maintenance of movable bridges in their locality. As noted last month, Chesapeake is the only locality which maintains movable bridges in the states. These payments are provided in the attachments to your resolution, and we recommend their approval. Our second item is a request for approval of the street maintenance payments and overweight permit fees revenue distribution for the counties of Arlington and Henrico. I provided an overview of this process during last month's workshop. As you might recall, payments to Arlington and Henrico are a single rate per lane mile for each locality and are not distributed based on functional classification. Subject to your approval, street maintenance payments for fiscal year 22 will be $19,695.53 per lane mile for Arlington and $14,331.53 per lane mile for Henrico County. These rates are both up from FY21's rates of $19,125.29 and $13,916.59. They will also receive, these two counties will also receive overweight permit fees in the amount of $13.53 per lane mile. The payments are included in the attachments to your resolution, and we recommend their approval.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Can you remind me what the disparity in the payments per lane mile sort of represents? I guess there's about a 30% disparity between the two counties, 14 and whatever they are.
That's about right. Between Arlington and Henrico.
Yeah, I mean, so
right.
what, yeah, I don't remember.
That's based on code. The base rate was based on code. So each year it increases based on their inventory that increases and our budget.
So we're just going off the code, if you will.
Absolutely. So each
So
year
it really isn't, it's not germane in a sense for us, I guess. I was just curious what drives the cost 30% difference between Henrico and Arlington.
Madam Secretary, Mr. Miller, yes,
It's
it
code.
is based in code.
Thank you.
So our third item is a request to transfer surplus revenue sharing allocations to an underfunded non-revenue sharing project in Prince William County. According to board policy and revenue sharing guidelines, any transfer of surplus revenue sharing allocations to a non-revenue sharing project must be approved by the full board and go to a project that requires the funding to be advertised or awarded within 12 months. For this action, Prince William County has requested board approval to transfer $3 million in surplus revenue sharing allocations from the Minnieville Road widening project, which is complete, to the Potomac Community Development Project, which is being delivered as a design project. The county plans to go to award for this project by December of this year. The VDOT Nova District Office has obtained concurrence for this transfer from Ms. Hines, and Local Assistance Division has reviewed this request and recommends approval. Fourth item is a request to both deallocate and an economic development access allocation made by this board in 2019 and to provide new allocation to Botetourt County's Botetourt Center at Greenfield for a new project in that industrial center. I provided a review of this request at May's workshop, and you heard a little bit about it this morning from the county administrator. Approval of this request will both deallocate the $650,000 from the previously approved project and allocate $644,500 to a replacement project. We've reviewed the request and recommend approval of the resolution and the action. The fifth and final action is a request for economic development access allocations for a design-only major employment and investment site in Shannon Hill Regional Business Park in Louisa County. As a reminder, a major employment and investment site is one in which is expected to result in more than $250 million in capital investment and employ more than 400 people. The EDA policy allows for a design-only allocation, and Louisa County has requested an allocation of $643,612. $143,612 of that will be matched by the locality for design of the access road improvements. We recommend approval of that request.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Secretary,
Mr. Merrill?
just one question. You mentioned that Chesapeake is the only jurisdiction that maintains their own bridges. Does VDOT have any type of oversight or supervision or audits? I understand you correctly that they do their own bridges and they're the only jurisdiction that do that? Movable bridges?
Madam Secretary, Chesapeake is the only facility or entity that gets an added pavement for their movable bridges. The localities are still responsible for the inspection and maintenance of the cities are responsible for their maintenance activities on their bridges. But in this case, Chesapeake is unique in the city street maintenance payments that they are carved out another $1 million for specific to their movable bridges.
Any further discussion? Mr. Dudley, you were very busy presenting these items to us in May. I really want to say you did a great job in presenting all of this information. So, okay, with that, please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Mr. Dodson. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Hines. Mr. Yates. Mr. Williams. Ms. DeTunk. Mr. Malbin. Mr. Kasperlitz. Mr. Stinson.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Rucker.
Yay.
Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
The roll is complete. The resolutions have passed. Thank you. Margie?
Ms. Mathis, this is Carlos Brown. I'm here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Madam Secretary, members of the board. I'm here with an action item on approval of the annual safety performance targets. I briefed the board last month to share with you our modeling efforts that we go through, as well as the expected benefits of projects that are programmed during that time period. And we would recommend your approval of the new safety performance targets.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Mr. Merrill, Mr. Rucker, Mr. Miller, Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Kasperlitz, Mr. Malbin, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Williams, Mr. Yates, Ms. Hines, Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Rolls complete, the resolution's passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
I have one item for your consideration this morning. It's a limited access control change request. It is located in the county of York, along Route 199, Marquis Center Parkway. We've had a request from a developer for 2 breaks in the limited access control along Route 199 to construct 2 commercial entrances to serve a planned commercial development. York County is in support of this. VDOT has reviewed, and we do recommend your approval.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Dr. Smoot,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hines, Mr. Yates, Mr. Williams, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Malbin, Mr. Kasperlitz, Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Rucker, Mr. Merrill. The roll is complete, the resolution's passed.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Mitchell.
So for item 14 on approval of the program guidance for the Transit Ridership Incentive Program, we are going to defer this action until July. We had a public comment period that was open until Friday, and we actually received a number of comments late in the day on Friday that were, yeah, very good comments that we would like to consider more and bring back some potential revisions to you all next month. So for item 15, this is approval of round 2 of the I-395 and I-95 commuter choice program of projects. This is in accordance with the January 2019 memorandum of agreement between the CTB, VDOT, DRPT, NVTC, and PRTC. This program of projects was approved by the boards of NVTC and PRTC on May 6, 2021. DRPT and NVTC briefed you all on this at your May meeting. The total cost of this program of projects is $22.7 million for a total of 13 projects that are going to be implemented by 6 different agencies, as well as administrative costs for NVTC to administer the program. We recommend that the CTB approve this program of projects and the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission administrative costs and include the funds in the 6-year improvement program.
Madam Secretary, move approval.
Second that. Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Dr. Smoot,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hines, Mr. Yates, Mr. Williams, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Malbin, Mr. Kasperlitz, Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Rucker, Mr. Merrill. The roll is complete, the resolution's approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Donahue. I was just commenting, for those of us who've been on this board for a while and lived through the creation of Smart Scale, Nick and I were walking out yesterday. Gosh, Nick, you really don't present very often anymore. So we miss seeing you up here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I have before you a resolution for the adoption of the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program. Just as a little bit of history, as you recall, this is came out of the 2019, what we call I-81 bill. In that, it provided a funding statewide for interstate corridors. We spent the last year or so working with you on outlining how the allocation of those funds could work, along with the development of the I-95 and I-64 corridor improvement plans. What this resolution and the attached policy would do was lay out the framework under which we as staff will bring back recommended improvements to this board. It does specify that off the top, we would fund operating improvements, and then that we would look at TDM and other capital strategies, prioritize them in a manner similar to what we did for the I-81 corridor improvement plan, where again, we used a subset of the measures in smart scale, again, focused on congestion, accessibility, and safety as those four categories, with congestion, safety each being 40%. It then asked us to update the corridor plans and our evaluations of the other interstate corridors every 4 years, with the next update being by 2025. So again, just getting kind of on a regular schedule, similar to what we have with VTrans. And then finally, it also directs staff to go in and analyze and develop a methodology within 12 months could then be incorporated in the prioritization process in the future to look at the impacts of projects on greenhouse gas emissions and the state's adopted climate change goals. So again, at this time, we do not have a methodology, so that is not included in the policy. And so the initial tranche of recommendations you receive will not include that, but it does direct the staff at the Intermodal Office working with DRPT and VDOT to develop a methodology in 12 months, which clearly we would bring back to this body to seek your input and concurrence on. And at that stage, the resolution further stipulates that would be incorporated into the attached prioritization process. And so, Madam Chair, we recommend adoption, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So moved.
Sure, just a comment.
Any further comments?
Just pleased to see the inclusion of greenhouse gas emissions as a consideration and OIP's role in helping to identify what that involvement would be from a board perspective, as well as the option for managed lanes in areas that we see congestion continued to be a problem up to 30 years. So it's a good resolution. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Mr. Merrill,
Aye.
Mr. Rucker.
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Kaspowitz, Mr. Malden, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Williams, Mr. Yates, Ms. Hines,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
The roll is complete. The resolution's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Donahoe. It's not that we don't get to see you, however. Aubrey Prezioso, welcome. I just want to say in the beginning, it has been our custom as a board that during these resolutions that we stand, which I'm planning to do today. And because it's an electronic meeting, we must also do a roll call. So that's just the process we're going to follow for today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Morning, Madam Secretary, members of the board. We have three namings this morning to discuss and present to you. The first one is the William H. Pritchett Memorial Bridge. The Pittsylvania County Board of Supervisors in Lynchburg District has passed a resolution asking us to consider naming US Route 29 Business North over Route 29 in Pennsylvania County to be the William H. Pritchett Memorial Bridge. This is at the north end of the Danville Bypass, if you're familiar with that area. Mr. Pritchett was born in 1927. He served in the U.S. Army. He worked for the Universal Life Insurance Company. But Mr. Pritchett was also the first elected board member for Pittsylvania County that was an African American. He also served on the board for over 20 years, spending time as chairman and vice chairman. Throughout his service with Pittsylvania County, he represented the Social Services Board, the Community Services Board, the Community Action Agency, and he was also a longtime member of the Bethel Baptist Church. Mr. Pritchett passed away in May of 2016 after a full life of dedication and service to his community. VDOT is not aware of any objections to this proposal and recommends approval.
Mr. Dodson.
Yes, ma'am. Obviously, I never knew the individual, Mr. Pritchett, but some of you know that Pennsylvania County is the largest county in the state of Virginia, and to go that many decades of local representation and now have somebody who's African American tells you the depth of his leadership. His early 90s that he was elected. So I move the resolution, and I look forward to being at the dedication.
Second.
Any further discussion? Please indicate your approval by rising. Ms. Mathis, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Smoot,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hines, Mr. Yates, Mr. Williams, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Malbin,
Aye.
Mr. Kasprowitz, Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Rucker,
Aye.
Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
The roll is complete. The resolution's approved.
Thank you.
The second item we have for you this morning is to consider the naming of the Sergeant Major Walter L. Shoemate Memorial Bridge. The Tazewell County Board of Supervisors and the Bristol District passed a resolution asking us to consider this. This will be for Route 747 Old River Road, as it's across the street from the Pocahontas High School. Mr. Sergeant Major Shoemate was born in 1934 and began his military career in 1952. He served in both the Korean and the Vietnam War. He was an original member of the Army's Delta Force and served in many different roles through his time in the Army. The list of awards and decorations is long, and I feel it's important to maybe mention through those. He received the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, the Republic of Vietnam Cross of Gallantry with Palm, the Korean Campaign Medal with 3 Bronze Stars, the United Nations Service Medal, the Vietnamese Campaign Medal, Master Parachutist Badge, the Combat Infantry and Expert Infantry Badges, Combat Diver Badge, Master Freefall Badge, and the Special Forces and Ranger Tabs. The agency is not aware of any opposition to this proposal and recommends approval.
Mr. Stinson.
Madam Chair, I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Sergeant Major Shoemate, but his record speaks for itself, and it's my pleasure to ask that this resolution be passed.
Any further discussion? Please indicate your approval by rising. Thank you. Ms. Mathis, please call the roll.
Mr. Merrill,
Aye.
Mr. Rucker,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Kasprowitz, Mr. Malbin, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Williams, Mr. Yates, Ms. Hines, Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Roll is complete. The resolution's approved.
Last item we have for you this morning is for the Canine Cara Memorial Bridge. The Augusta County Board of Supervisors and Stanton District has passed a resolution asking us to consider naming Route 640, which is Old White Bridge Road over the CSX Railroad in Augusta County, to be the Canine Cara Memorial Bridge. Canine Cara was a member of the Skyline Drug Task Force and was involved with the Augusta County Sheriff's Office in vehicle pursuit on White Bridge Road in Augusta County. Canine Cara was a certified explosive detection dog, actually from the Stanton Sheriff's Office, and was assisting to find a gun from this pursuit. Unfortunately, the canine fell from the overpass over the CSX Railroad, and her injuries led to her death in service for the community. VDOT is not aware of any opposition to this proposal and recommends approval.
Mr. Merrill.
Yes, thank you. The Sheriff's Office and the Board of Supervisors of Waynesboro County are requesting recognition of Kara in naming this bridge in her honor. So I
Second.
move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? Please indicate your approval by rising. Thank you. Ms. Mathis, please call the roll.
Dr. Smoot,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Hines, Mr. Yates, Mr. Williams, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Malbin, Mr. Kaspowitz, Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Rucker,
Aye.
Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
The roll is complete. The resolution's approved.
Thank you. Amy Motley.
Actually gonna let me talk this time. Madam Secretary, members of the board. Is that what it is? Okay, thank you. I'm here today to ask you to approve a contract. We issued an RFP to provide surveying services for the delineation of right-of-way in the Buckingham Branch corridor. Professional services, architectural engineering. We had 8 offers. The amount's a little over $6.2 million, and we'd like to award this to Rice Associates Incorporated with your approval.
Approval.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Madam Secretary,
Mr. Smoot?
thank you. Just for information purposes, is this going to be for the entirety of the Buckingham branch or just parts of it?
Yes, it is.
Could you repeat the
And-
question?
The question was whether the survey services are for the entirety of the Buckingham Branch corridor, and it is for the sections of the corridor that the Commonwealth will be acquiring as part of our transaction with CSX.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Mr. Merrill,
Aye.
Mr. Rucker,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Kasperlitz, Mr. Malbin, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Williams, Mr. Yates, Ms. Hines, Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Roll is complete. The resolution's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cordell? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Secretary, members of the board. The action in front of you today is actually a follow-on to a resolution that was passed at the May meeting. And that May meeting, there was a description of the toll system integrator contract, along with some funding reserves being utilized from toll facility revolving account. Time was of the essence, and the commissioner was given the authority to execute the contract as soon as we got the documents in order. There was a step in that resolution that required us to come back and affirm that, in fact, the contract was executed, and that's the resolution before you. The contract was executed last Friday, and it's we have our first kickoff meeting this coming Friday. So, any questions?
Make a motion, we approve. Second.
Any further discussion or questions? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Dr. Smoot,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Hines, Mr. Yates, Mr. Williams, Mr. Tunk, Mr. Malbin, Mr. Kasperlitz, Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Stinson,
Yes.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Rucker, Mr. Merrill. The roll is complete. The resolution's approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Caples? Welcome back.
Madam Secretary, members of the board, I have 3 items for your consideration today. The first project is order number D90. This is a Richmond District plant mix, our schedule contract for this year's schedule season. We had 2 bidders on this project. The low bid was beneath the design estimate and within the range of the evaluative estimate. We're recommending award to Allen Myers, VA out of Glen Allen.
Mr. Smoot. Oh, sorry, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, so moved.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Brown. Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Mr. Merrill.
Aye.
Mr. Rucker.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Stinson.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Kasperlitz. Mr. Malbin. Ms. DeTunk. Mr. Williams.
I need to abstain.
Mr. Yates. Ms. Hines. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Dodson. Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
The roll is complete.
Next project is order number F21. This is a Northern Virginia District project for Hot Lane Bicycle Pedestrian Facilities Phase 2 on 495. We had 4 bidders on this project. The low bid was beneath the design estimate, within the range of the evaluative estimate. We are recommending award to Shirley Contracting Company.
Move approval, Madam
Second.
Secretary. Any further discussion? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
Mr. Dodson. Mr. Johnson. Ms. Hines. Mr. Yates. Mr. Williams. Ms. DeTunk. Mr. Malbin. Mr. Kasperlitz. Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Stinson.
Yes.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Rucker.
Aye.
Mr. Merrill. The roll's complete. The motion's approved.
The final project today is another Northern Virginia District project. It's DB 109. This is a design build project in Nova District for Boundary Channel Drive at I-395 interchange improvements. We had 3 bidders on this project. The low bid was beneath the design estimate. It did exceed the range of the evaluative estimate, but after conducting our analysis, we find that the bid represents good value for the Commonwealth and are recommending award.
Madam Secretary, I move approval on this, and I will just say this project came the first year I was on the Arlington County Board in 2008. So it's kind of nice to be able to move it along.
Oh, my goodness.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Who's the award to?
Shirley Contracting Company.
Anything else? Please indicate your vote in the roll call.
Mr. Merrill. Mr. Rucker. Mr. Miller. Mr. Stinson.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Kasperlitz. Mr. Kasperlitz. Mr. Malbin. Ms. DeTunk. Mr. Williams. Mr. Yates. Ms. Hines. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Dodson.
Aye.
Dr. Smoot.
Aye.
The roll is complete. The motion's approved.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Caples. Is there anything else? The board today?
It's nice to be live.
It really is, and it was great to be with everyone yesterday and last evening and be with you all today. So the Environmental Subcommittee is meeting where?
In the HR training room, which is the room that was used yesterday for the rail subcommittee meeting.
So we'll be meeting there immediately after this meeting, and next month we meet back here.
We meet back here in the exact same format.
Exact same format. So like
Secretary.
Julie Whitlock, we did everything pretty well today. Okay.
Madam Secretary, are we planning to have all our meetings in Richmond the rest of the year, Carol, or do y'all decided?
We've not made that decision, but the
Thanks.
next one is going to be in Richmond. And just to prepare you, we may need to have a meeting in Richmond. It'll be electronic. We just need to get the quorum in this room. So with that, I'm going to thank you on this very momentous occasion, bringing you all back to Richmond, and I really thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Dr. Valentine.
There you go.